You discover through the eyes of your friends or your family or your children or your grandparents. We all are looking for different things but open to new discoveries. What I'd like to share in some of my images is just a few things that maybe some of you aren't used to actually searching for or maybe not even particularly interested in. And so we'll talk about rock Dunder. From a bird's eye view. I'd like to start with the eyes of a bald eagle. Because it's a very special bird. You certainly have the chance of seeing a bald eagle flying over rock Dunder at some point. They're distributed through eastern Ontario, certainly more so down the St. Lawrence River. But what a wonderful way to discover rock Dunder from the air. This isn't quite a bald eagle from a bird's eye view, it's more a doodle view. But I'd like to, for those of you that haven't looked, we're here in a hall just in Morton, right in here. And we're going to hike roughly out to past the first cabin and up along here and eventually come to a second cabin in around here. You can see where that cursor is. There's a nice little viewpoint here. And then up rock Dunder, the top of rock Dunder. Across the way we'll see Dunder's mate. South of us is in this direction, and then we'll hike back around this little lake and back eventually to there. So what you see on the left, this body of water is Morton Bay, right over here, and Queen's Island, and over here is Whitefish Lake, and you can see Morton Bay, and it's a little hard for me to move this cursor directly toward Morton Bay. Jones Falls is up in this direction. Here's another view from a plane. And again, we're going to be walking along the shore of Morton Bay, which runs roughly along here. And this is our objective, which is rock Dunder, and the background of those ponds that you see in the distance. Here's looking from the other direction, back towards Dean's Island and Jones Falls off in the distance here. And you can see again, this is rock Dunder, and we're looking instead of from this direction, from over top of Dean's Island, we're looking in the opposite direction. Do some of you recognize where you've walked on there? It's pretty neat to see it from the air if you haven't seen it before, because we walk around this pond. And you'll notice the trail itself does not pass right down to the shoreline of this pond here, because one of the mandates of an organization like ours is not only to provide, in the case of rock Dunder, access by a wonderful trail system, but also to conserve some of the natural habitat. And so I don't think it's necessary to take you to every single pond. I think it's nice to have a pond where wildlife can just be by themselves more or less, not disturbed. It all started back in 2005, 2006, and of course the wonderful thing about a community-based endeavor like this is that we had support from all kinds of people, donations from and time, whether through a talk by James Raffin or contributions through the Trailhead and through Mountain Equipment Co-op, who generated interest in our endeavor to raise enough funds, and we're talking well over $200,000, to initially purchase this property. We don't always purchase properties. We rely on donations of some areas, but occasionally a very special spot comes across, comes to our notice, like rock Dunder, and we made a special drive, and there's still contributions by people like you and some of you here, no doubt, that we were able to fairly quickly raise the funds to purchase rock Dunder from the Boy Scouts. Those of you, most of you have hiked it, many of you have, and of course some of the first things that we had to get in place were bulletin boards to provide a map to the area and give you some sense of where you were going. And here we can see, as we'll pass by the actual main route of rock Dunder. Let's see if I can. Here you can see we're starting from from over here from the parking lot, and we'll, actually today, we're taking a different route. We're going to hook up though, and catch up with cabin number 1, and hike over to cabin number 2, up Rock Dunder, and then back this trail. It's a trail that for most people, it depends what you're into. If you're there walking a dog, hopefully on a leash or under control, you may go pretty quickly, or go at the speed of your dog. If you're there with a camera like somebody like me, who tends to take way too many pictures, it may take you 2 or 3 times as long. So most people, we say to hike up to Rock Dunder, whether you do it one direction or another, and do the whole loop of the main trail, anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. It's nice for many people to enjoy, as some of you have no doubt here, a picnic at the top and make a half day of it. The start of the trail, and of course recognition of donors is an important thing, and we certainly had some wonderful donations to help make this talk possible, and the donation plaque put up on the wall. But of course it's not always the big donations, it's a combination of those who have the means to make a wonderful contribution in that type of amount or more, as well as the $1 and $2 Looney contributions are all important to help us maintain the trail. There are 8 benches scattered around Rock Dunder, and this is one example donated in this case by the Walker family. This is Pete and Carol Walker, and a bench dedicated to the family. Another thing, of course, with our properties that we have to be aware of is to put property boundary signs up. And that's not always easy. This property has been surveyed, but the survey was done in the wintertime. And some of the cliffs and scrambling that the surveyors had to do to find where the proper boundaries were was interesting. And then we had volunteers help put up the boundary signs. Now, this is the kind of project that happens occasionally at some of the properties. This is an example of Matt Saunders, a high school teacher with 3 of his students. He gave at the time an environmental studies course, and he had 2 or 3 students out to help put up wood duck nest boxes. A case where in some places you may have lots of dead trees that normally a duck like a wood duck, which is a hole nester, would look for a hole in the tree, but sometimes those trees fall down over time, and it's nice to be able to occasionally pick your spots where maybe you can enhance the habitat a little bit. It's not always necessary, but they put up several wood duck nest boxes, and I'm going to show you a secret a little later on of an example of what you can find in one of these nest boxes other than wood ducks sometimes. It's amazing what shows up in a nest box like that sometimes. So here we were, hands-on, but not a major project, but a way of helping out some of the wildlife. And this is the kind of view, and you can see here the one box they put up, but over to the right, I think they're putting up a second box there. But imagine yourself, if you were a duck, sitting in that box and looking out the hole, what kind of view you have. Now, I wanted to show you a few pictures. For those of you that have been up Rock Dunder, I imagine a lesser number of you have been here in the winter. Winter is a special season up here. It's not always open. In fact, as far as we know this winter, there's not going to be access to Rock Dunder in the winter time. You take your own chances in terms of whether you decide to snowshoe or hike up here. But I wanted to share, not at the end of the talk, but at the first, so I don't want to end with winter. A few pictures from a hike, or a couple of hikes that I took in the winter time. I snowshoed the last 2 times. This is down near Morton Dam, a little road that you can take, this road that we're walking on further to start our hike. If you follow it all the way along, it veers off to the right, takes you to Morton Dam. This is the start of the day, Morton Bay. But you know, some of the kinds of scenes that you can find in a beaver pond that may just look like a swampy little patch to some people, but of course in different, or planning to hike Rock Dunder over different seasons is something you might want to consider. Taking a particular spot and trying to take a picture from that same spot in different seasons, even different times of the same season will give you a whole different viewpoint. It's kind of fun. to discover spots. You could, if you're careful, in those winters where the ice is safe, snowshoe, or even I've seen cross-country ski tracks, although I don't particularly recommend it, along the ice. And I'm not trying to suggest you should do this, but in some winters it probably is safe. Along the bay, and this is the kind of thing you discover, that special blue-colored ice in frozen waterfalls, that not only will you see them from the trail, but when those little rivulets or streams that are still flowing in the winter hit the bay, it's quite dramatic sometimes. And the neat thing is that some of the vegetation that grows here is the type of stuff, and ferns especially, Christmas ferns, polypody or rock ferns. It's greenery that more or less stays green right through the winter season to 1 degree or so. It's not just that monochrome white and black that you see. You can discover special spots where you've got that beautiful lichen color, the pink granite of the rock, and green manganese. You never know what you're going to discover. Here's one of the heritage cabins that we'll walk past that was hauled here by the Boy Scouts, and we're trying to preserve as a heritage structure. An example of walking into a second cabin along the line. Now, of course, there's always a challenge when you're trying to maintain a trail system. You've got areas where you've got erosion being caused by, especially those seasons when you get lots of water. And it's not necessarily the time of year that I'd recommend you try hiking in all trail areas like this. And quite frankly, were too many people to walk, and we'll be walking this section of the route today, were too many people to walk in those kind of conditions, it creates a future problem in terms of trail maintenance. Because it's not really a small trail, not always set up to handle great numbers of traffic. Here's the neat thing, of course, in the wintertime. You may not see the animals themselves, but you may discover stories in the snow, whether it's fisher tracks or whatever it may be. And in that way, you're still discovering some of the wildlife that's there, because fishers certainly are found throughout the Rock-Under area. It's a time of year that you may discover owls. Rock-Under itself is not a hot spot for owls, like the Amherst Island or some other areas. But you never know when you're going to get a great gray owl invasion coming from the north, because their food sources run. It happened last winter. A number of great gray owls were hanging around Ottawa. Great photographic or just pure viewing opportunities, and certainly one showed up in Rock-Under. The more common type of owl that you might hear or possibly see is one like barred owl. And they stay right through the winter for residents of the area. In fact, some people have had them in their own backyards. Wonderful creatures and very gentle souls to them, but it belies their true character sometimes, because some areas that are known for having a lot of small owls, like saw-whets and different types of other owls, can be predated upon by the barred owl. The barred owl is actually a very fierce predator, and when barred owls move into an area, they will make a habit of going after a lot of small animals and smaller birds. In fact, in BC right now, they're having major problems because barred owls, which are not as native to parts of BC, have moved into places where they're killing off rare spotted owls. They're in a real dilemma on what to do. Here we are up on the Rocky Barrens near the top. Beautiful in the winter time, whether you've got a mantle of snow looking towards Rock-Under, just across the valley. Morton Bay would be to our right here, or occasionally, of course, you get the snow wind blowing. Another view from the very top of Rock-Under. But of course, winter wanes eventually, and spring comes. And you can see this isn't that much into the springtime, and already the greenery is the greens there, the white pine and the polypody fern, rock polypody fern on the rocks, and different critters and animals that you wake up. Typical ones like red squirrels that you find, but also birds like ospreys. There is a resident osprey family around the Morton Bay Whitefish area, so you'll occasionally have a chance of seeing osprey, or certainly great blue herons along the shoreline, up in one of the ponds or along Morton Bay itself. other years not. And this is a case where beavers were using this lodge for a while, but eventually they vacated. It was taken over by Canada Goose, and that goose had awesomeness. So that's not helpful. Now this is the little kind of secret that you never know what you're going to have in a wood duck nest box. This is a screech owl, and this one wasn't taken at Rock Dunder. This is in my backyard, right near my garage. I have 5 wood duck nest boxes out in the woods around my house, and I opened up the side of the box to make sure it's in good shape for the coming nesting season, and I saw something in there. You know when you look in a dark space in your eyes, take a few seconds to adjust for that darkness. And my God, I saw something in there, and finally I could discern, sure enough, a little screech owl was sitting, and as it turns out, on 6 eggs. Now, I normally wouldn't go back and take another look, but it didn't move. All that moved was its little eyelid, just a sliver. And I said, well, I'm going to take a chance, and very carefully open the side of the box, because the box set up, you pull a pin. In fact, Dwayne, it's one of the boxes like you make up. And you can lift the side up very easily, very slowly, and the next time I looked, there were some young owls, and it produced 6 young owlets, and the cutest looking things, and found them sitting in the trees around my backyard. So you never know what you're going to find other than wood ducks, all kinds of things. Flying squirrels. I've had flying squirrels in there, and great crested flycatchers missing. It's amazing. Springtime comes, and again, Rock Dunder, actually one of the best viewing areas for the profusion of spring wildflowers is actually around the parking lot area down wood frog that is one of the first frogs you'll hear. But all bets are off right now, because I've heard tree frogs through the winter at times. I mean, the climate is warming up to a degree that things are happening, and you never know the rules are being bent. This is a spring peeper with that cross that you'll find on the back, tiny little thing, many of you are familiar with them. You get too close to even a dozen spring peepers in a small area falling, and their decibel range is high enough that it hurts. The sound is so loud it can hurt your hearing. And there were a bunch of these in a tiny pond when I took them, and yeah, I could understand why people say that. But unlike the spring peeper, wood frogs actually expand the sides of their bodies, and they use them like bellows, and that's how they produce their sound, not the same as some of the more typical type of frogs. This is another shot, that last one down on the right. The colors don't show up there very well because the flash, I used a headlamp for light, not a camera flash. But this is the same type of frog, the wood frog. I think of it as the amphibian equivalent of a raccoon with that mask. But their sound is very distinctive. They're like quacking ducks. If you hear a frog call that sounds like, it's sort of like quacking ducks, as soon as the ice starts melting in the ponds, small ponds, mineral ponds, you find the woodlands, it's wood duck, wood frog. Here's a chorus frog though. And last year when I hiked, my first hike around Dunder, there wasn't any of these other frogs I heard. For some reason there was a profusion of chorus frogs. Now if you took a plastic comb, and ran your, well, you can't really hear that, it's not like that comb, but it's the sound. If you take a certain type of comb and run your finger over it, that's the sound of a chorus frog. And what I'd never discovered one before, and I saw this wet area, and I just made sure to move these around, because I tend, as a photographer, searching for stuff like critters like this, I do some things that I wouldn't want to advertise particularly. I was literally kind of crawling through this pond of water, and all of a sudden I saw what looked like somebody blowing up some bubble gum in the water, and I saw vibrations, those little ripples spreading, and heard the call. And when you find something for the first time, you start noticing whether it's a certain type of car. You buy a certain car, and then all of a sudden you notice the same colored cars all over the place. Well, it's the same with this chorus frog. I found the very first one, my brain figured out what it looks like, and then I started seeing all these bits of bubble gum being blown up on the surface of this pond, and hearing these calls all around. And chorus frog. They're a springtime frog, and sometimes the very first ones from here. They were all over the wetland pond areas around Rock Dunder. Affiliated woodpeckers, you've seen trees with the, as you do on Rock Dunder in places where they've been looking for insects or beetles or whatever they're looking for. Yes, they do have an impact on trees, but truth be told, if you see a tree that's been, some people will say, ravaged by affiliated woodpecker, chances are that tree has already been on the down slide, because it's a home for insects that are already previously started the decay process. To discover these little plants here all around this area, in addition to the fern-like plants that you see there, they're what we call club mosses. And this is a group of plants that in the time of the dinosaurs grew to almost tree size. They're early relatives. And there are different types that you find around. And it's not the kind of plant that most people would even pay attention to or know about. This is an example. The first one is the ground cedar, and I believe these are ground pine on the main soil. There are other things that you can find at the right time of year, like early chetpecking along on the granite ridges as along Dunder. The occasional glacial erratic that you see and discover, and of course, if you're into especially photography, you can zoom in and do some macro work and discover little miniature ecosystems in a sense on the rocks. The rock polypody fern that you've got a miniature natural bird to discover. Little spots that you may or may not visit that are directly on at different times of year, the colors that you can discover there. This is in the summertime, kind of mid to late summer from the top. Very dramatic cloud formations that can roll in sometimes. Or you can go on that little satellite trail that isn't on the main trail. It's the other little route to discover totally different spots that will be closed. Beaver lodges in one of the upper ponds, and that's one of the viewpoints. And actually, we'll be hiking around here. And the first area is up on the cliff up there. There's a viewpoint up here, and then we walk around the pond. And this is a secondary viewpoint as you're continuing along the trail. Loons aren't particularly found in the beaver ponds. It's not the normal type of habitat. They need deep waters, but certainly in Moreton Bay you occasionally get visiting loons, and not necessarily nesting directly there, but on the nest just outside there. You can discover different types of turtles. This is more a southern type of turtle found in southern parts of the Atlantic. It has kind of rich-like scales on its shell, some a little bit like the snapping turtle. Other, needless to say, porcupines. Porcupines are very hard to photograph, I find, because they're mostly dark, and it's taken me many times trying to get a good photo of porcupines. Why do we always say that? It's so I had to literally back away from this Bambi, like little cute little. Anyway, I didn't want it to pick up my scent because the female deer was off in the woods somewhere, for some reason not there at the time, and it started hobbling towards me. I had the telephoto lens on, and I literally had to back up. I didn't want it to come too close to me to pick up my scent. Do you recognize that shot? Yeah, I was looking at that last night when I put these slides together, and I was wondering how we didn't end up sliding on the rock. But it's not, I mean, it is steep, but it's not quite as steep as that picture gives me. Canoeing, of course, is another way to discover it. Here's another view from the water, looking up at Dunder. And Dunder's Main. And the turkey vultures, in this case also a great blue heron flying by. That's certainly something that many of you have seen at the top, no doubt, whether over Dunder's Main or Rock Dunder, because you still get those. And then true morels, the people that know them, that are very tasty. There are coral or brain-type fungi, things that maybe you haven't seen before, and in this case right next door to one of the most deadly mushrooms there is. You take a good-sized bite of that, that's called the destroying angel, that white-colored mushroom. Beautiful mushroom. can be found conceivably in the right habitat anywhere in the world. Many fungi or mushrooms are found in many different countries. But the combination of that bulbous base to it and the veil around, that kind of mushroom, generally speaking, stay away from, don't touch, because many of them are quite poisonous, and this is one of the most. This is fly agaric. It's both hallucinogenic but poisonous at the same time. Unfortunately. I won't say any more, unless somebody asks me, but I want to try it. This is the kind of thing you can discover in a place like along the trail. There's a white pine plantation, a very acidic environment because you've got all those needle straw planted when the Boy Scouts had the property and grown up now to a sort of 20 to 40 foot height. And so a fairly relatively sterile environment, not many plants are adapted to growing in very acidic spots like that with lots of shade. This is one of the things that does grow in the right conditions, and this was two falls. They were tiles, very colorful, also called fly agaric mushrooms. All kinds of different types, folio type mushrooms, and this is what they look like, type mushroom when they're expanding all the time. So you may not be into mushrooms, but this is a good place for those people that are interested in the very colorful ones like this rusty mushroom.
That's a good mushroom.
Pardon me?
That's a good mushroom.
Yes, yes. There are certain types of this type of mushroom, a bowly type of mushroom, that kind of little pot, how would you describe that? Like a crunchy bar, if you know crunchy bars. Not the usual gills, but they're an interesting type, and insects eat those very quickly. Or specials, there are a few species at risk around Dunder, but you know, this is one of the few pitcher pines that are found along the trail. But I don't look at rock dunder necessarily just for the species at risk. Areas like this certainly have some important, very rare plants or animals, but I look at it more as just a dramatic example of typical kinds of habitats that you find in the Precambrian shield area. It's important just to protect it for what it is, in addition to trying to conserve the species. This is written by a very streamlined looking type of garter snake, and they're a rare type of snake. Very harmless, totally harmless. Poison ivy, that's a good reason not to go on trail with a number of areas. There's lots of poison ivy. Or this is a particular rare species on rock dunder called shining sumac. It's a relative of the regular sumac bush. Fall comes, of course, colors start coming out. Although this year, just wonderful days, warm temperatures, but slowly the colors come. A little subtle at first. This is a viewpoint down from the second cabin along the way, and then they start to really come out. And you're discovering a special spot. And here we are looking back towards the dam that holds the water. You know, that was the original route they looked at for the Rideau Canal, which means they can go down through the dam out of the system. Colonel By changed his mind when the beaver ponds, of course, involved rock dunder. So, that's pretty well the end of my pictures. I think it's important to consider, don't worry about the weather. A place like rock dunder, or places similar to it, I think any time of year, any type of weather is a neat place to discover. Believe it or not, these were a group that we had initially on a Voyager canoe trip that we paddled up to the dam at below rock dunder. They were on one of these days that companies have to motivate their employees. It was boring. We paddled from Jones Falls, 18 of us or whatever, in this Voyager canoe, and I was battling away. It was pouring rain. We got to the dam, and I asked if anybody really wanted to go up rock dunder. They were all game. And this is literally, you know how certain things bring you together? You're almost forced into it. But we had a fun day. We got drenched with hay. It wasn't another winter. I'd like to thank you for coming out today because, you know, it's important to preserve areas like this. For those of you that have haven't been to Rock Thunder before, it's really neat of you to show up and enjoy the day with us. Thank you.